Well, welcome. Thank you everyone for humoring me on the names and the designs. And we're here to talk about the mystical way. I have some copies of slides that I'll pass around that I'm using, but I only made 4 copies, so people will just kind of like pass them around and share, hopefully. And I guess I just want to start with like my orientation to the theme of today. So like I know there's like very smart, brilliant people who like nerd out hard on human design that speak at HDHD, and I wouldn't self-identify as that kind of person. Like I've certainly studied and all that, but you'll see like as I go through the mystical stream and the gates and channels, like I kind of use my own words, not that I go off and make things up, but like if you look at my design, I'll go back to the agenda in a second because very left here. But if you look at my design, I'm like part logical and also part experiential, and I'm pure collective. I've got the 1156. So much for me, especially as a projector too, is like, what's your story? What's your experience? And I think something that's always stuck with me that one of my teachers mentioned was like, you know, Ra used to always say like, write your own Ray Ching, which he stopped saying because then people got kind of weird. He was like, maybe that's a bad idea. But if you listen to some of his lectures, including I think his Bardo series, he says it. He's like, yeah, you should go and like write your own experience of the gates, which I've had the privilege of doing in a separate project. But that's some of what's coloring how I'm talking about the content of today. I know lots of you already have your own experience and understanding of the mystical way, and also there are some of you that are like, hey, I just discovered human design and I'm here because it's awesome. So I'll try to kind of bridge the gap across the whole spectrum. Yeah. Real quick, just for the people who want a sense of time, because I'm one of those people, I have probably like 60 to 90 minutes of talking about the mystical way first, and then we'll take a break. The bathroom is right next door. You don't have to go outside to go there. I know it's hot, so we can like open a window if it, yeah. Or, oh, okay, so I guess we can't open a window, but we can do our best to not respire as much. Okay, so we'll take a break. And then after the mystical way, I know the title of the talk was like, oh, what's juxtaposition? And several people were like, oh, are we talking about 4 ones? And it's like, no. So I have a little bit to say about juxtaposition, maybe like 30 minutes worth. But it's relevant for everyone, is the TLDR. And then we can just jump into charts. And if you want to share your info with me, we can dive in as a group. But also, if it's feeling like you're tired and you need to slip out, that's great too. But first break will be like around 2:33. Just, yeah. Okay. Any like logistical things? Is everyone comfortable? I love how like most people are like, I don't need a chair. Okay. So what else? Oh, I also wanted to say this. Okay, so human design. Ra presented human design as this like very logical system, right? The science of differentiation. But it's also, in my opinion, a mystical system, which is like very not, it's like kind of the opposite, right? 2 sides opposite, but also like the same thing. And something about the mystical that I find really interesting is how in the past, the mystical and the occult was always protected by secrecy. It was like if you were like Jesus, you like went off and you like got initiated for a decade and then you like returned. Or you were like in the, I don't know, you were like getting high on like psychedelic honey and like in the caves or whatever. But now in today's world, it's like, oh, let me just punch in my birth time to ChatGPT and it'll tell me what I need to know. And so in some ways, like there was a part of me kind of in my seeing that early on that was like, oh no, like all the secrets are just out there. But it's actually, I think what's interesting now is that the mystical and the occult is now protected by misinformation, is what it feels like to me. And so one of my teachers always says this. She says, the truth has always been covered in BS. And discovering for yourself what's true is what leads you deeper into yourself, like capital S, kind of maybe what we're all here for on the journey of human design. So something to think about, maybe not even just for this workshop, but like through your week, is what are you really here for? Like the thing that grabbed you about your design, like what is it for, right? And I'm not saying, I mean, I obviously don't know the answer to that, but a contemplation. Because once you're on the path, you can't get off it, is what I've learned, even when you want to. And we pretend like we have a choice, but we really don't. And there's that Chogyam Trungpa kind of anecdote, right, where he like gathers and like all these people come in and he's like, great, if you haven't stepped foot on the path, you can still get a refund. I recommend you leave. But if you already have started, like, you can stay and we'll talk. So this topic is near and dear to my heart because I think for me, that's what human design has been. It's like I thought I was like opening up the door and like heading into this tent of like, oh, I'm gonna be like the best at being a projector and like life will be so much better because blah, 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 like wasn't working. And then it turned into like, oh my God, there's another tent and there's like another set of questions and whoa, this is like not the circus I thought it was gonna be. And like, there's some weird shit, but here we are. So, okay, great. So with that, let me pull out my own slides to keep myself on track. So this is the mystical stream. I didn't print out all the slides because I wanted to be paper conscious. So this is like a few slides ahead, but it's got the mystical stream on it. Sorry, there's only 4 copies. But also, if at the end of this, if you give me your email, I'll email all this to you too. So for those that can't see, the mystical stream. So it starts in the root, and then it goes up through the solar plex heart, and then through the G in the throat. And it's made up of 4 different channels, half of them in the tribal circuit, and half of them in like loosely individual, but individual integration. And at a very basic level, I think most people understand your definition is something that's fixed in you, right? So you get your imprinting and like this is consistently in your experience. And where you're undefined is where you're open. So obviously that applies to centers, but it also applies to your gates and channels. And so just looking at your own mystical stream, you can start thinking about, okay, wait, don't skip ahead.
I'm not skipping ahead, I'm just making a record.
Okay, I'll email them to you if you want.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just give me your email. But you can also, you're welcome to also.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So as you're looking at just the first page, everyone, you can think about what gates you have as these are the fixed parts of your mystical process. And also, if you have no definition in the mystical stream, you're not a mystic. So this is like something else to think about, right? In terms of like self, not self, where are we trying to be what we're not? Common example, projector trying to be a generator, right? If your mystical stream is like totally open, which is rare, but there's someone here who we were talking to the other night who has an open mystical stream. And there's a couple others I know of who they will say like, and actually one of the people I'm thinking of, she got a reading from Ra and he was like, you're not a mystic. And she was like, what? Like I've been studying with this, other person for like decades. But she realized she had been running around like trying to be the mystic, as opposed to as if you're a reflector, right? You're kind of sensing what's going on with the community. If you're open or quite open in the mystical stream, instead it's like this ability to really smell the BS in these mystical contexts, right? So that's like just at the very highest level before we even get into gates and channels, like something to think about. Okay, so the other piece that we can look at is, so now this is like the actual slide that you have in front of you. You can see that the first 2 tribal channels I have in red there. There's this journey of things start in the root, right? And there is this pressure and moves through this like feeling emotional thing. And then the inflection point is in the ego. So in the heart center, so much of it is communal and tribal. And yet here in the mystical stream, we have this inflection. Oh, I put the inflection point at 2551. Yeah, that's true too, I guess. But the tribal changes to the individual in the ego. And then at the 2551, I think of that as that's where the leap into the void happens. So yeah, feel free to move my stuff if you want to. Okay. What else do I want to say about this? Oh, just that, I mean, also, like, the mystical stream, I think, is human design's answer to, or like template for awakening, right? That this is the journey you're on if you're on this, like, discovery of self thing. And yeah, I think that's all that's there that I want to touch on. Okay, cool. So let's jump into the individual channels. So down here at the bottom, if we started at 19, also, so for the whole mystical stream, there's like an entire set of mystical keynotes that are different from the regular keynotes. At the end of this deck, I have all the keynotes there. I don't necessarily, these slides here are sort of an amalgam of just like what I see between the mundane and the mystical. So the 1949, under regular circumstances, is this, it's like this drive to take care of needs and the emotional sensitivity to sense, like, yeah, like what are our needs? Do we need food, shelter, like school for the kids, right? But in the mystical context, it's this drive to seek God. It's like the very beginning of this whole thing. And so that 19 is this pressure to wonder. It's a drive to find the interconnectedness of all things. And yeah, and the pressure to find God as a tribe and the need for magic. So some of those same keywords about pressure, drive, need are here, but rather than just like the daily survival stuff, it's, oh, like as a group, we all have to like believe in something, right? And what is it that we believe in? In this channel, I think I see a lot of my very like shamany, earth-based traditions friends have definition here. They're the ones that are like talented medicine workers or, I don't know, like making beautiful, offerings in the forest kind of folks. And this is also where like sensitivity and that connection to animals is more in the 49. So to me, that's not something that like Ra specifically said, but it's just like something I see in people with this. And on the emotional side, so all of the emotional gates are awareness gates, which means there's also this, well, not yet, maybe technically, but there's also this emotional fear. And so the 49 can carry this fear of rejection. And in this case here, it's a fear of nature and the unknowable. That like, oh, there's these forces, maybe there's a drought, there's storms, whatever, like the gods are bringing this upon us. There's also this fear here of like, wow, maybe we really as like little humans don't have control over this, but we'll make a sacrifice. We'll pray to the gods. So yeah. Also, I mean, in here, this is where like food and sex is too, right? So like, I'm thinking really broadly, not just traditional religion, but just the groups that we live in. Like when I think about food and sex, the 1949 from like a cult perspective, it's like, oh, we have, I don't know, the cult leader telling these people to get married and like we can or cannot eat these foods or, we have these particular customs. And this is not a comment on any particular like religion or belief set, but interesting to think about these dynamics in whatever experiences with groups and religion and things like that you might have. And also, I mean, this could even be like a workplace, right? That like a certain company might have certain traditions. So, yeah. Does that bring up anything for anyone? I feel like sometimes when I talk for a long time, I don't want to pause. And yeah.
What I was just thinking of as you were sharing was also the example of the 1949 in the traditional sense of the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And just wanted to mention my perspective on Jesus is I feel crazy for even saying this right now, the ultimate sacrifice in the Christian religion. It's represented from my perspective in the 1949 as he was the ultimate sacrifice for sin in that religion.
Mm.
And it's interesting to me telling why since the 1949 will be breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
Since but the sacrificial lamb or the not the caretaker, but the fence around the container for place, if that makes sense. The
Mhm,
container
mhm.
for the flock itself is going to shift.
Yes.
In a way.
Yeah. Like the flock and the contract between
That, yeah.
shepherd and flock and butcher and all of that. Yeah. Okay. Also, I'm forgetting exactly what it is, but I was part of this art project where I was writing all the Chinese characters for the hexagrams, and then also, but like thinking about it through the perspective of the Rei Ching hexagrams. And Gate 49, part of the character is a blade, right? So it's like a little knife that you would use to like butcher an animal, but it also became the knife that was used in the revolution, right? Like peasant uprisings. And it's fascinating to me that the 49 is that it's like we talk about that too, like in the Rei Ching like context, right? And there's something there around like, to me it's just like how did it know? Like how did life know to like make the character that and have all of this meaning packed into this one hexagram, you know? So all right.
I have something to add there.
Yeah.
That also applies with it's kind of an abstract process that's it's my way of seeing things sometimes, is through the patterns of the hexagrams beyond the elemental representations of the trigrams, but just like getting into a certain state of consciousness and like looking at the hexagrams and watching like really simple associations of like, I mean, the cauldron is the perfect example, number 50, which is 49 flipped. It's like they describe the structure of a cauldron and they liken it to the parts of the 6 parts of the hexagram. Same thing with like many other things that I won't go into, but
the chop in the hexagram?
just the pattern, like the binary pattern of the broken and unbroken lines, and like, you know, you can imagine by shape and configuration how it relates.
Totally. It's like sacred geometry math, just like watching it like click through. Totally.
It's a little.
Yeah, you can't steer too hard. Thank you both. Okay, cool. So that happens, and then we can move to the 3740, which is, again, mundane level, community, the bargain. And here it's a spiritual bargain. So on the emotional side, this is about worship and coming together socially. So rather than like, hey, let's like feel emotionally, friendshipy, intimate, this is more coming together socially in the context more of like religion or belief sets. And so here there's tradition and honoring your family's God, and then also in addressing that fear that can be there, there's prayer. There's like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if something's going to work out. Let me pray about it. And so, what else? Yeah, this can also be like coming together in a Zoom group, holding on to like, I don't know, like channeling the intergalactic beings. Like there's lots of different ways we could think about this. And then on the other side of it, we get to the ego center. And also, by the way, I have no tribal definition, so sometimes when I talk about these first two, I'm like, I don't know. That's my filter. So
Feeling all right?
yeah. So the 40 to me is like, oh, just like work so hard. And so it's the will to work, but in this context, rather than being like, oh, I'm gonna like make a bunch of money and like, I don't know, get a nice car and like buy nice things for my family. This is getting resources for the church or the religious structure, right? And like, let's build this amazing cathedral because like I got all the gold foil and we're gonna do that. But also there's denial here, and I think Ra talks about his own experience with having the 40.2 in his design. And so it's really interesting because even though there is this like, oh, we gotta like, I don't know, have the pancake drive at church and like make sure that the new refugees in town, they can come to the church and we can give them shit so then they'll like also come and, you know, be part of the community. There's also this breaking away. And in the breaking away, it's the denial that really prepares you, or just in this general journey, for sorry, I get distracted so easily, for the individualism of the rest of the stream. So Ra talks about denial is in the act of being alone, that is a deliverance. So there's a transition point between struggle and liberation, because here, like a lot of in the specific keynotes, there's like, do I honor the traditions of my elders? Do I, obey them or not? Like a lot of the third line stuff is like testing that, right? So in this, as someone goes through and is really like completing the 40, we could say, there's this paradox where in the transition between this struggle and this liberation, you are totally alone. There's this feeling of aloneness. There's this denial and this turning away. And yet in that, there's the ability to feel at one with everything. And so when there is the God that you believed in or the institutions or whatever that you were a part of, in that aloneness, it's also like, oh, I can be my own God, my own lover, and then keep going with that. And so that's what's happening here. The spiritual bargain, what else? I just had some notes on like, I don't know, these things, maybe they've applied to you, maybe they don't, but some, this is like experiences that can happen here in the spiritual bargain. So it's like, oh, I'm having a tough time. Maybe I can be better. Maybe I can be more worthy for God. I'm going to purify, I'm going to cleanse, I'm going to like go on the fast. Or separately, like if I really believe I'm a good person, then I deserve better. And so how do I please God to make that happen? All ego center stuff, right? So ultimately this is about how you're really, because this is still tribal, right? How do we stay in the tribe and find a way to make it comfortable? So if there's some holding on to the fairy tale, wanting a certain reward that you've been told you can have, whether that's heaven, salvation, living your purpose, ascending into higher realms, like whatever it is, there's okay, cool, so what do I do, right? Then what do I do? How do I fix it? Kind of tick, maybe we'll call it. And I say all this because I've done this too, so. Okay, we're out of the tribal, onto the crossroads. So before I continue with the mystical stream, there is another way you could go, which many of us do, which is the material way. So the regular tribal stream circuit goes up through the 2145, and all of that survival tribal stuff, gets put out into the world through the throat. And the material way is about money, sex, power, control, right? On the tribal side, we already kind of talked about like the food, the sex, and so forth. But the 2145, it's like, I'm the king, I'm the queen, I'm in charge, I'm going to manage things. So there's that power and control piece. And if we were to include the splenic side, then there's like the material resource part of it too. And there's nothing wrong with the material way. In fact, even if you go the mystical way, you still have to live the material way. So we're all kind of going to be stuck there in some way. So it's just interesting, I think, to say this, because there's so often, I think, a spiritual longing that like, oh, if I go the mystical way, then like I don't have to worry about this mundane shit, like it just won't matter, or like it'll work itself out. But like the material way is still here, right? So that's point one. Second point of my 2 points on this slide is that most people go the material way. Like there's the 4% thing that gets thrown around in human design. This is completely unscientific, but my sense is like, if we were to 80-20 Pareto principle this, like 80% of the people go the material way. Cause that's just like, we need people to like run companies, and like, I don't really want to do that. Right. And then if you 80-20 twice, that's how we get to the 4%. So yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Someone was always that. I was like, oh, So it's like a fractaling of the 80-20, like all the way down. Just separately interesting. Okay, so that's my caveat of the material way. No one gets to bypass it, but we're going to keep talking about the mystical way.
I want to add something.
Yeah, please.
Is that you realize that the most spiritual thing to do, because we're in a human body, is chop the wood and carry it.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up on that side.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Coming from an ego being.
Yes.
Yeah.
A very mystical way to define tribal being.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about this in the context of seven-centered energy mechanics? Because none of those,
Mm-hmm.
except the 2151, which is not part of it.
Right. I haven't. I am now because you're asking the question, which is like, thank you. So, I mean, I think it fits, right? Because I think Ra's point is like, human design is here for those of us who it's here for, so that we can like be individualized beings, and that maybe it wasn't an option in seven-centered times, because like
My understanding, my attempt at interpreting, like
Yeah.
from one of the books that he's
Yeah.
contributed to, is that none of the mystical way existed in the
Yes.
story. Like
Yeah.
plenty was there, but
Mhm.
that's it. So
Right.
it's as though the mystic is a nine-centered thing.
in the way we're talking about it, I agree. I think there's like a whole separate conversation we could have about like past stages, like what was Buddha, right? If he didn't, but I think that, okay, so my take on it is what they were doing was what humanity was up to then, and it's actually different from what we're doing now. Yeah. I think we agree, it sounds like. Or I don't know if that was your...
There's a discussion.
Okay, yeah. Okay, you're like, no, not really.
I-
But yeah.
I have a question as well. Well, a framing request.
Yeah.
As somebody with both the 5125 and the 2145, I would love, I'm interested in hearing the differences and which point the choice path for the 2145 versus the void itself for anyone else.
I don't, well, one, I don't think there's a choice.
I
But-
don't disagree. I don't know
Yeah,
how to say it.
Yeah.
Like,
But
what
so you're
causes
saying-
you to go which way, materially or into the void?
I would say that's like monopole shit.
I'll stop trying to think.
What's the real question though, I guess?
I spent the beginning of my experiment leaping the 51 intentionally and then learning never to do that intentionally. And the 21, 45, 45 is part of my purpose. So I'm trying to, my design and personality are both projectors. So I end up teaching myself and learning from other projectors. I guess I'm trying to comprehend with words and language the difference of the two so I can start to better observe. I hadn't thought before you shared the 2145 as the other option to this. I didn't realize that aspect, that there were two different ways you can go from the ego like that. And I have both of them. So I'm just trying to, I guess, see so I can observe when my body's doing one or the other and understand it better. Sorry, that's personal though.
I mean, we can get to this in the second half of this, because I think where my curiosity goes is where's your 51 placement, and like what might be getting in the way there of how you're experiencing, because it sounds like it was maybe hard and gnarly, and there's a part of
About
you
5 years ago, yeah.
and there's a part of you that's like, ooh, if I can like consciously not do that, then I would not.
Well, it's not that. I mean, I don't do that now.
Okay.
I don't do it anymore. I guess I just want to observe the two different streams, the two different paths, consciously. These are my only two channels that are conscious.
Yeah, I guess.
But I didn't mean to hijack.
No,
I just
that's okay.
wanted to hear your frame.
Yeah. I think I would just maybe sit with, for you, like your experience of just your tribal channel and of the 2145 and like the tribal circuit, and like what is that? How does that show up for you? What is your experience of that? And then like what is the pull to the 51? And like how does not self get involved in that? Yeah.
Tonight, both of them unconscious, 45, 21,
The 55 is unconscious, the 51 is unconscious, the 25 is conscious, the 21 is conscious.
Too complicated.
Yeah, we could talk about
But get me after.
So we're going to keep going with the mystical way. Good things to be thinking about. And this is where, heading into the 51, I think the concept of the dark night of the soul is interesting to talk about. And I find St. John of the Cross's work on the dark night of the soul interesting. I mean, he's the one who came up with the term, right? And good job. And like my experience of like first even hearing about the dark night of the soul, I think is heavily colored by sort of new age, faux spiritual, like social media stuff. And I think what some of us probably know, because there's like very well-studied people in here, but what I did not know until later was that St. John of the Cross talks about the dark night of the soul in like four different stages, and he calls the first two the dark night of the senses, and then the other two the dark night of the soul. So there's, I made this quadrant, I added this in for my talk in the past, which I really like. So there's active, passive, active being like what you think you can do, you're kind of like a participant, you're making choices, and then passive being like really just surrender, and he's a Christian, right? So I kept his wording in here of like, he thinks of the passive dark nights as what only God can do. I'm not saying that maps onto our talk about the mystical way, but keeping his language. So active, passive, senses, soul. So we start off with the dark night of the senses. And this is what you think, like this is like the beginning of the spiritual journey, right? So you detach from worldly distractions, you turn to God, you learn about human design, and you're like, oh my God, yes, like I'm going to start like da-da-da-da and like tell people about it. And that's great. That's amazing, right? And it shakes things up, and it can really feel like this is big. Something is happening. And then at some point, there is a passive dark night of the senses. So this is where God, or we could substitute like life, universe, the forces, seems to withdraw. So now it's like, at first, it's like the high of like a new thing, and then there's like, whoa, this is more than I signed up for, maybe. And we feel spiritually empty. Because the initial, this is my language, he didn't say initial shiny things, but the initial shiny things don't work anymore, but it's actually preparation to meet God on a deeper level. So this is, I lost my job, I can't live here anymore, the person broke up with me. In my case, it was getting rear-ended on the highway in like a terrible car accident. So something happened and you didn't do it, right? And it feels like a dark night. But in both cases of the senses, it's happening just like more outwardly, I guess. I think there's a better way. Maybe it'll come to me how to articulate that. But then we progress. And so in this passive night, dark night of the senses, then there's the like, oh my God, so I'm going to like now do something about it again, right? And so the active dark night of the soul is yet again you, but in this case, you're detaching from the spiritual goodies in an effort to surrender more deeply. So maybe you're like in the ashram and like things have blown up and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna like do more seva or something. But again, it's like you're somehow involved. And then finally, we get to the passive dark night of the soul, which is only by the grace of God, the falling away of the self-center or ego, encountering the terrible void in ourselves, darkness, nothingness, the typical menu of things. So I think this is what most people think they're referring to when they talk about the dark night of the soul, but in my uninformed, I can't possibly fully know, but my sense is that a lot of times people are in maybe like dark night of the senses, but they're actually referring to it as a dark night of the soul. And that's very understandable. Like, I totally get it. We all go through hard things and we want to be able to tell a story about it and make sense of it. And at the same time, like, I don't want to overuse or diminish what a full passive dark night of the soul really, really is. And so there's an author, Mirabai Starr. She's sort of like a mystical writer. Yeah, anyway, I like this quote. So, the dark night is not an abstract notion on some list of spiritual experiences every seeker is supposed to have. The dark night descends on a soul only when everything else has failed. When you are no longer the best meditator in class because your meditation produces absolutely nothing. When prayer evaporates on your tongue and you have nothing left to say to God. When you are not even tempted to return to a life of worldly pleasure because the world has proven empty. And yet, taking another step through the void of spiritual life feels futile because you are no good at it, and it seems that God has given up on you anyway. This is the choiceless choice when the soul can do nothing but surrender. So, not just like a thing that happens and you're like, oh, what an initiation. Yeah, and so like, again, important to mention because if we go back to the material way crossroads, a lot of so-called spiritual things, I think are on the material way, and they plant their flag as close as possible to the 2551 because it sounds like intense and sexy and like, but generally speaking, maybe a controversial opinion, but generally speaking, things that make you feel better are not the mystical way. So like all not all, but many modalities of healing, right? Altered states of consciousness, manifestation that promise endless prosperity. You can be comfortable and have everything, and you can fit it all. You can get all your desires and fit it inside capitalism neatly, and still be like a productive member of society. In the realm of connection and relationships, this is I'm just gonna like orgasm my way into enlightenment. It's gonna be blissful, merging unity consciousness, and also like therapy, communication practices. Okay, all of these things I love. I have participated in them. They're great, but they're not the mystical way. That is my point here. So when anything that's promising goodies without the death rebirth is probably not the mystical way. And that's okay. Like I think that there is a space for both of them, but let's get clear on what's what. What else? Yeah, and I'll get to, okay, I guess I'll share this here. So on the dark night piece, I'll say like, laying it out the way I did, I can map my own journey onto this. And as some of you know parts of my story, so I discovered human design the year of my Saturn return. My 6-2s will relate. I was like working this really intense job, and I was in a marriage, and I was also like working out with my MG partner who was like, yeah, we're gonna get so strong together. And then I got really sick. And so I had chronic health issues that I was dealing with for about 3 years. And then it wasn't getting better. And that same year when I was basically forced to quit my job because I couldn't, like I was taking a cab to work because I was like too exhausted to do my little flat 10-minute bike ride. And went through a divorce, and this was like while the pandemic was unfolding, and me at the time was like, oh my god, it's all blown up. Of course this is a dark night. Yep, like definitely. And it's only in hindsight that I can see like, oh, that was just the warm-up, like that. And this is like 3-4 years, right? It wasn't like, oh, this like one thing happened. And it was, so I share this to just highlight, like, there's also nothing wrong with thinking that you're somewhere that maybe you come to realize was like actually somewhere totally different. And I'll get into more later, I guess, as we keep going. So 2551, so fun. So gate 51 is, so this is Ra's personality sun, right? And he's in Aries. And the 51 is all about, in the mundane sense, shock and like, yeah, it's about shock, right? But it's Aries energy. So I think about like fieriness, and it's interesting to think about the fiery shock energy in the context of the mystical, because fire is used as a symbol in so many traditions, right? Like the fire, what did I write? Because I actually want to make sure I say it right. Yeah, to long for the fire, right? This longing to be actually like burned up, right? Like burning away what's false and to be annihilated, like that's all here, which is, again, just like the symmetry and the symbology of the system is incredible to me. And the 51 is the only individual gate in the ego center, right? So all the other gates are tribal. So it is about this, like, I'm going to assert myself, I'm going to like run and like make the leap. And yet on the other side of this channel is this love for everything. It is the surrender. And so in the mystical stream sense, this channel of sure being spiritually initiated, but also leaping into the void, which maybe could be the same thing. In the 51, it's like, hey, I have my will, but I'm also going to surrender that will too. So not my will, but thy will be done. And then, and also something else about initiation too. So some quotes from a couple of people who I just like the way they talk about initiation. Especially in, a society where we lack initiation rituals. It's not just the hard thing or the uncomfortable thing, it's what we feel like we would die without. So the things that we feel like we would die without are usually hard to imagine, like what would it be like to not have this thing, right? So inherent in this channel of initiation is we can't imagine what's on the other side. And in my case, it was like, I would die without my home, my marriage, my reputation, this came later because I feel like I cycled through a little bit, but like my sanity. These are all things that we feel like we would probably die without, right? Or, this is a breathwork teacher I like. She says, it's not an initiation unless it takes you to the edge of life and death. It changes the whole game. And to play on that analogy, I think of like, it's like life comes and like flips the whole board game over. Like that feels more like initiation. So 51 we could also think of as the active parts of the Dark Knight kind of quadrant. And then on the other side is the passive. So the 21 is it's the gate of innocence. And I think of it as like the cooling waters of the void that kind of like calm the fire of the 51. So there's this, and Ra talks about this, the coolness of the 25 and like, how the inanimate has gate 25. So there's like the hot and the cool. And when you're on the side of the 25, where there is this universal love, there isn't a separation. There isn't like, it's me and like, here's what I'm about. It's just everything. And it's also, gate 25 is also the gate of blood too. And it's interesting the connection between like blood and sacrifice. So the word blessing, the root, like the origins, Old English, Bletzian, in Germanic, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Blottison. But anyway, so it means to mark wholly with blood. And so this gate of blood, also this gate of really leaping into the void and being caught, there is a sacrifice that's made, but then also a blessing that's bestowed in like being like, yeah, I trust, and then being caught by that. I also think this is where, if we go back to the material way, sort of like co-opting, this is where I feel like the it's all love can get distorted. Yeah.
Something just occurred to me about 25 and blood and the sacrifice. It's the thing that can make inanimate and animate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also the holy, and then how do you get blood? You make a hole. And then there's like a lot of
yeah. We could play with all the different. Yeah.
It's not by accident. Like it has to be in English too, and not in any other language. Like it's a thing.
Yeah. Yes. So in this gate 25, I also like being here because one of the higher rates is 25. It's like nice. Every time I'm like, oh, innocence. Yeah. So, okay. So this is where, like, you know, this universal love, I think, can also get co-opted a little bit of like, it's all love, and then just using that as spiritual bypass. So I'll share, like, maybe also I have gate 25, so it's I didn't say in the beginning, my definition in the mystical stream is the 25 and the 20. So I have 25.5 and 25.3, and the placements of those are in my marks. So they've been, I used to think like, oh, 25 is just like really intense for me because it's in the mystical stream. And then I was like, oh, but also it's like a key part of my mutation. And just for yourself, you can also look at when in your own design, the particular lines, right, of these gates as well, which I won't go into all of, but just as an example, using myself. So the 25.5 Ra talks about is like one of the weakest fifth lines in the whole Rei Ching, because it's about like healing and like health stuff basically. And so it was a huge thing. I think, well, John, anyway. So for me, right, as I mentioned, I had like all these chronic health issues, and so for me, like part of the mutation and all that was like, oh, my body is going to break down and need recuperation, and that's like a way that things kind of move through me. And then on the other side of that, the 25.3 is about failure. I think it's something like innocent action alone doesn't guarantee success. Like, you might feel real innocent about it, but like you're still probably going to fail. And that sucks. Like, I'm sorry, I'm like such a perfectionist. You know, I got the 1858, and like my conditioning and life and whatever. And it was like devastating for things to fail. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to put it, but it sucked. And then to read this in my own design and see like, oh, but this isn't meant to like break my spirit. That actually there is a spirit that can deal with the failure, right? So some fun things I'm sure exist in all of your designs as well. Yes.
I was gonna say like 25.
And
Yeah.
it's in your cards, right?
I'm 25.3 son.
Yeah.
But it's innocence, right? So if you keep your innocence, that helps you with resilience,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you. Okay, so now we're in the G. We're almost there, and we're going from.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Sorry. Ra also talks about in the Line Companion that you require the gods to land in the 25, and you touched on that. It's one of the things that I think is pivotal for the channel with the Dark Night of the Soul, as you put it, is that to get through that, you need something outside of yourself. Not necessarily a not self, but gods or universe, as you said, or life. Something to land in that innocence requires not just you. You can't, and Ra talks about how to land in the 25, you have to be humble, and you're humbled because of the circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to add to that, it's like you're giving up the personal I, right? You're leaving the personal will of the 51. And it's like, oh no, so like what's there? And then we're in the G, and it's like, oh, you're there. Yeah.
And in the the mystery of the vessel keynotes, it's the other three gates of the vessel that are like the cup itself. And the 25 is what fills the cup.
I didn't know that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, okay, so now we're in the G. We love the G. This line is so funny because I was like, how do you depict a monopole? I don't know. But that was my attempt. And I want to note here that when we cross the 25 and then go to the last channel, what we're doing is we're crossing the G, which is where the monopole is full stop. and again, this is where mystical traditions talk about, like, you're in this process and you cross the still point. There is this empty core, like, who am I, the layers, oh, nothing is there. And the monopole itself is this little speck of dark matter. It's this little speck of like nothing in quotes. So again, just a moment of like being awed by everything saying the same thing. Yep. So it's 10 pieces of dark matter. It has ground. Okay. And as reminders, because this will kind of tie to later in the afternoon, the monopole is this capture frequency, right? That holds you together and allows you to present as being solid. And so when we're really crossing this, whatever is happening in your personal dark night experience, the way that I would articulate my own experience of it is seeing through the illusion of self, irrevocably, irreversibly. And this is where the personality is then capable of actually becoming a passenger. That, like, in my opinion, up until this point, if you're like, I'm doing it, there's still a passenger trying to drive, right? But in crossing the G and actually encountering and seeing through the illusion of self, you actually get to meet the driver, right? You get to meet the thing that's doing it, that's not you, and having the actual, like, oh, I'm seeing, I'm not me, we're not doing it. And so there's, again, the paradox that I think exists when we get close to the truth of totally empty, you've totally surrendered personal will, the I, and yet in this emptiness, there is the hilarious, like, complete fullness of like, great, now go be yourself in gate 10, right? So
It's the in-breath and out-breath.
yeah. Exhale, exhale. Oh, and so, yeah, now we get to be you. So let's talk about gate 10. All right, so 10:20, awakening. I guess I titled this, Who You Be in the Present. So as we know, gate 10 is where all the lines of the profiles come from. It's about how you behave as yourself. I think remembering that gate 10 is part of the integration circuit too, and that this is a gate that's in plants and animals. It's not about survival, but it's connected to these survival things that, like, even sometimes I just like see a sunflower and I'm like, oh, you're doing such a good job of like being yourself, you know? So it's on some level, again, it's really mundane to just be you, but it's also the most profound thing that we could do. So I don't always love Richard Rudd, but sometimes he has good stuff. So in the Gene Keys, I like his description of gate 10, which progresses from, well, we don't even need to talk about whatever. Let's just go to the gift. So the gift is naturalness, and then the city is being. So you're really just walking the walk of yourself. And there's something unshakable in that, right? It's like you can't not be you. Someone telling you to not be you is like that's not going to happen. And we can get to this place because of the journey of leaving the tribe, right? That there is no longer we're not playing the game of needing to belong to the tribe or fearing what's going to happen. There's the ability to be disliked, not from a rejection or pushing, but just, I've been so stripped down, all I can be is me. And in that, now that aloneness as deliverance has like delivered us here, it's this, I've got me no matter what. And guess what? That's being your own authority. So that's the great paradox. I think it's also, we have this Rumi quote, right? I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God. This is the search that we kicked off in the 19. And maybe I'll just end with the actual keynotes in the mystical sense can be helpful to contemplate as well. So if you're, I'm 3. So first line, mystical keynote. These are all forms of self-love. So how can you love yourself? First line is about modesty. And so to me, I think of like, I'm just little me. That's like what I think about with modesty. So you're not downplaying yourself, but you're also not like aggrandizing yourself, right? It's just a total comfort in the modesty of being yourself. And then the second line here is to be independent. And so, us second lines, we get the call, we step away, we do our thing, and it's so specific, right? And that's what it is for a second line. To be themselves is to be independent, and you're not abandoning yourself because you're doing your own thing, and that's finally like not abandoning yourself. The third line is to be just. Also, sorry, I said that 10th grade, these are forms of self-love, but it's like you love yourself by being these things. So I think all of these keynotes starts with like to be blah, right? So for the third line, it's to be just, which is about fairness. And this is about actually moving from what doesn't work to really being people who know what's fair. Like that doesn't work, but this does work, and this is a fair outcome. Fourth line is to be patient. So for all the, I guess more for the 4-6, because we're talking about like another thing I would say. So if we're talking about the mystical way and awakening, we're talking more about the black than the red, right? And not to say that some of the red stuff can't resonate, surely, but we're talking about the passenger actually surrendering. So I would think more about the first number in your profile. So for fourth lines, patience, and so much of being a fourth line is like your network and like waiting for the right opportunity and like just like one branch and then reaching for the next. And that requires patience. It's not like, cool, I can just boom, 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 like charisma people into it. I mean, maybe, but that's more fifth line, right? So it's actually being patient with trusting the network and patient with allowing one thing to come before leaving the other. Fifth line, to be direct. So this is, it doesn't matter to me whether this is heretical or not, but I'm saying what I see as the universal truth. And then 6 lines, to be an example of yourself. So that's the 10th gate. And then where does it all go? It gets expressed in the 20, which is the expression of your unique individual spirit. And if this could speak, as all the throat gates do, it would say something like, I know I am. And again, I like Richard Rudd's city for this, which is presence. Like I think of the spiritually advanced people I've met, and they're just so like crazy present, right? They're just like there with you. And again, I'll just read the keynotes for this one because I think they're interesting as well. Because rather than just presence, he specifically talks about it as like each line has its own way or path to waking up somehow. So the first 3 are paths, and then the upper trigram is ways. I don't remember, do you know like how he differentiates path versus way? Okay, I don't know, he just uses different words for them, but upper and lower trigram respective. So first lines are the mundane path. So this is about seeing magic in the ordinary and living your life. This is my language, living your life as a ceremony. Second lines are following the narrow path. So again, about that like picky, specific way. Third lines are about the path of self-consciousness. So being, conscious of what's working, what's not. The fourth line is the way of cooperation. So I think Rod's like, this is like love thy neighbor kind of stuff. The fifth line is the way of form. And you can think about Ra again with the form principle. It's like super practical, right? Like something in the physical form, that's how I'm going to get there. And then lastly, the sixth line is the way of wisdom. So how do I take this whole process and make it useful? Because wisdom is broadly applicable. So I make it broadly applicable, but I'm also, as a sixth line, being the example for it as well. So, okay, great. So we made it all the way to the end. I have just like a couple quotes, and then we can take like a short break. So what happens? What happens when you get to the end of the mystical way? I think like people have already chimed in a little bit around like it is this paradox, and simultaneously you are more of you and less of you, right? There's less of you, and that all of this false, not self, whatever, is no longer there. And then yet somehow that makes space for more of you to come through, even if you didn't know who that was. And we know, I think most of us know the Ra quote. So there's the chop wood, carry water, but there's also Ra's way of saying it, which is stupid before and stupid after. Like, you think you're doing this amazing thing, and then it's like, oh, the end. You are just you, and you get to live your life. I like this Data quote, David Data. Again, all the people that I quote, I don't necessarily agree with everything, but the quotes themselves I like. So, spiritual opening doesn't change the picture much. Just because you may relax and abide more fully as openness, the always and already one, the totally full and totally empty I am of beingness, regardless of the picture that is appearing. It doesn't mean that you will become a grasshopper or suddenly act like you weren't abused as a child or didn't inherit a genetic or environmental predisposition to Christianity, Judaism, food scarcity, cancer, alcoholism, or arrogance. Willing to feel and offer everything as love, their individual people lives may be limited, but not limiting. Relaxing open exactly as their form is displaying, their loving is artfully played through whatever cards they've been dealt by nature's unfathomable confluence of influence. So it's basically, it's all exactly the same, but you're relaxed with all of it happening. And that is it. I would say that's the great promise of human design, that you can live as yourself without trying to change or manipulate or argue with life. Yay, you win. So, I feel like we want to pause soon. It's like warm and whatever, but I had an example. I had like Ross chart specifically to kind of give some examples. We can do that after a break. And then before I do that, let me just say, so what time is it? Okay, it's 2:15. Maybe like we'll 15 minutes, like 2:30ish, come back. And then we'll chat a little more. I'll do the short chat thing and then we'll take another break, because at some point, if you know you want to talk about your chart, it would be helpful for you to come up and give me your birth time during the break, so I just have your chart ready and don't have to like mess around with it. So come give me your birth time if you want to talk about, if you're comfortable sharing your design with the group. I'll start an email list if you want the slides, and then you can leave if you're like, I'm good. But I hope you stay. Okay.